Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Garrett Hake in Washington. Vice President Harris hit the campaign trail this afternoon for her first event as the de facto Democratic nominee, as more Democrats consolidate around her candidacy and as President Biden prepares to address the nation publicly for the first time since withdrawing from the 2024 race. Today, the vice president holding a rally in the critical swing state of Wisconsin as she seeks to reintroduce herself to the American electorate from her new perch on top of the ticket. Rallygoers clearly fired up as she told them she will be the nominee while pitching her record and attacking Donald Trump.
We have earned the support of enough delegates to secure the Democratic nomination. I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then. And in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. In this campaign, I promise you, I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week.
Today's event coming as more Democrats rally around her candidacy. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries endorsing Harris at a joint press conference this afternoon. And more than 2,500 pledged delegates have now endorsed Harris. That's a majority of all the delegates to the convention. Now, we should note these are just endorsements. They're not official until the roll call. But in a sign of confidence, the Harris campaign has turned its focus to choosing a running mate. A dozen names from sitting governors and senators to cabinet members have all been floated. But NBC News reports the Harris campaign has requested vetting materials from at least 5 of those possible contenders, including governors from the so-called blue wall states of Pennsylvania and Michigan and other key battlegrounds. Some of those contenders in audition mode as they made the case for Harris today.
I believe that Vice President Harris has been able to excite and unite not only Democrats, but unaffiliated and Republicans who really don't want to see Trump elected as president again.
She is tough as nails. She doesn't suffer fools. Like me, she's been a prosecutor. She stood up for the rule of law, and she has always stood for the people. Donald Trump has spent a career screwing over people.
Meanwhile, Republicans are revamping their campaign message. Here's Trump vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance at a rally yesterday in Virginia.
History will remember Joe Biden as not just a quitter, which he is, but one of the worst presidents in the United States of America. But my friends, Kamala Harris is 1,000,000 times worse, and everybody knows it. Don't give her a chance to run away from the Biden record. The Biden record is the Kamala Harris record. She signed up for every single one of Joe Biden's failures, and she lied about his mental capacity to serve as president.
Now, this all comes as President Biden has now returned to the White House for the first time since dropping out of this race and battling COVID. This is ahead of his primetime address tomorrow. He spoke via phone to the Harris campaign and their staffers yesterday.
The name has changed at the top of the ticket, but the mission hasn't changed at all. And by the way, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be out there in the campaign with her, with Kamala. I'm going to be working like hell, both as a sitting president, getting legislation passed, as well as in campaigning.
We'll get out to Wisconsin in just a moment, but joining me now on set is NBC News chief political analyst Chuck Todd, and down Pennsylvania Avenue is NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. So, Chuck, I'll start with you. That did not seem like a continuation of a Biden campaign event today. That felt like something different in Milwaukee today, did it not?
It did. No, it does feel as if that she's got her voice, her forward-leaning. Look, just in the last 48 hours, she's been more forward-leaning just on the issue of abortion, frankly, than President Biden had been over the last 4 months. And then you throw in, she's more comfortable at going after the convictions on Trump in a way that Biden never was, whether that's Hunter Biden issues, whether that's the discomfort of sort of the role of the federal government, sitting presidents looking like they're weighing in. However you want to look at it, he's always been uncomfortable. She you see the upside of not having any responsibilities.
That's right.
You know, right? Neither Trump doesn't have any responsibilities. Biden has responsibilities, right? And you have to worry about little things like, oh, I have to, you know, not step into it with the Justice Department, things like this. She has this and this room to maneuver. And look, it's a pretty aggressive message in many ways. She's trying. What's interesting now is Trump was in the position of challenger. She's trying to reposition this race where she's the challenger.
That's right.
And he's the incumbent. And that's a fascinating dynamic here, and I think a difficult one for the Trump campaign to deal with.
I'll tell you what, the crowd in Milwaukee certainly responded to it. I want to play a little bit more from this rally and get your reaction on the other side.
Yep.
America has tried these failed economic policies before, but we are not going back.
I don't recall seeing that much energy at a Biden rally in this campaign, certainly not in 2020 when I went to more of them. Is this just pent-up energy in the Democratic base, or is this a more organic response to her specifically, in your view?
Look, right now it feels like any crackers or Ritz, okay? Meaning like, meaning I'm starving.
Yeah, sure.
And that's not to say this doesn't continue and you start to say, hey, this is her. I think right now she's benefiting from what you just described. Going forward, it's on her to keep it going and to make this more about her. I think right now it's more about relief that they have somebody who can, I mean, I hate to be this cynical about it, could put two sentences together without having to cough or interrupt or fix it or say the wrong thing. That, I don't think we fully realized how much they were campaigning with one arm tied behind their back when it came to their inability to message. She's showing in 2 days what just simple, basic campaign messaging can do for your campaign.
The contrast is really striking. Chuck, we're going to come back to you in a minute, but I want to bring in Kelly now. Kelly, we're going to hear from the president again in prime time tomorrow. What should we expect? And it feels like this is already kind of yesterday's news. We know he's out. What more can he add to the story going forward in this speech tomorrow?
Well, I think he was constrained by COVID and being isolated in Rehoboth, and maybe the emotions and the difficulty of getting to the decision that has brought about the conversation you were just able to have. And so this is a way to breathe life into the announcement itself and to allow the president a human moment and a moment to also prepare the country for what does it look like to have this new dynamic between a sitting president who will finish out his term and a sitting vice president who is now the candidate. And Joe Biden certainly wants to claim credit for the phenomenon of the moment of Kamala Harris. He chose her, he endorsed her, he ultimately made the painful choice for him to not run when he had been very clear that he wanted to, and to try to write the first pieces of his legacy going forward. He has said legacy doesn't matter. He wanted to get the job done. So that's a piece of it, too. He's got 6 months. There are things he can try to accomplish in that time. Some of it is in his wheelhouse of foreign policy, where he's got important meetings, where he has been so influential in trying to keep NATO working together and expanding in its size. There are a lot of things that will be Joe Biden's long farewell note to the country in his public life. And the first part of that happens tomorrow night. He says he wants to be engaged in the campaign, and he can do that in ways where he is emphasizing his base, labor, and certainly his long relationships and his influence to try to support Kamala Harris. But as Chuck said, she's got to carry the ball forward. So Joe Biden gets to tell the country why he made the decision to defend his decision to remain in office. There have been some Republicans saying he should just step down altogether. That is not something he intends to do. And it's really just a moment to look the American people in the eye and tell his story of what is, in many ways, an improbable life in the public space, where he had wanted to be president so long, finally got there, wanted a second term, and now he's back to embracing this notion of being a transitional figure, which may be the longer legs of his legacy going forward, if he can have a good 6 months where he can articulate, where he can send his message, where he can just be Joe in some respects. If he can do all of that and enjoy the final bit of being a sitting president and continue on his agenda, then maybe he can come to some peace with where it's at as well. And will the public give him room to do that? There certainly has been an unlocking of appreciation for him since he made the decision to step aside, but a primetime address for sure.
And Kelly, quickly, is it too early to know exactly how the Harris campaign might use him? I would think a sitting president can certainly raise a lot of money. Do they run him like he's running for governor in Pennsylvania, where he's already been campaigning a lot? What do we know about their strategy to make use of the president of the United States? Pretty good asset for a campaign.
He is an asset, and it is using him in those places. Firefighters, union workers, the first president, sitting president, to ever be on a union picket line. We saw that happen. Working the phones, raising money, being in places where he can expand a bit of her reach. He's got strong support in the black community. Certainly Kamala Harris has that too, but it may be about amplifying that and just trying to get those core constituencies. And for people who are on the democracy message, that's something that's been a big part of his presidency and his campaign when it was under his name, and that may be something he can speak to as well, while she sort of defines herself in new ways and shows us what she's been doing while she was a vice president, which people who I have come to know covering her and those who have worked for her who say she's been doing the homework. Well, now the American people have a chance to get to see that and to see her tested, and no doubt she will be tested in this campaign. Yeah. That is a certainty.
She's racing to define herself, Chuck. The Trump campaign is racing to define her as well. They're, by the way, I've noticed, still going after Joe Biden pretty aggressively. They want to use him as an albatross around her neck going forward.
They do, and I think right now it's just out of they don't know what else to do. I'll just be honest. I think they're kind of, you could kind of see that the party is kind of split on this. You have House Republicans, some of them are ready to move on. Others think, oh no, use the age thing. You just said it yourself. It's old news. Yep. And we move on fast in our society. I mean, have you been on social media, right? Like, this is, so I don't know if hitting Biden is as effective going forward. Maybe it works for another week or two. Maybe it works just talking to your base. I don't know how effective that is. I'm very curious to see how the Harris campaign uses Biden. Yeah. I think we will see him Monday night at the convention, because I can't imagine you don't give him that, which is the traditional send-off, sure. Right, the traditional sort of the outgoing president usually gets that first night. Exactly, the gold watch speech. But I am curious to see if outside of fundraisers where they really would use them.
Well, stay tuned. We've got a lot of unprecedented time to go here. And Chuck and Kelly, thank you both. I want to bring in Yamiche Alcindor. She's just outside of Milwaukee, where the vice president spoke at that rally earlier this afternoon. They're packing up the stage behind her now. And Shaquille Brewster is also in Wisconsin, where he's been able to spend the day talking to the folks who actually matter in all of this, the voters in the battleground city of Kenosha. So, Yamiche, I'll start with you. You've been following Kamala Harris as she was stumping for Joe Biden for some time now. Now she's out stumping for herself. What stood out to you about this rally as she's kind of stepping into the spotlight here?
Well, as you said, they're packing up the stage, but just an hour ago, this auditorium was filled with people who were cheering her name, who were energized and very excited about her candidacy. And when she started off her remarks by saying that the road to winning this election goes through Wisconsin. So really putting her sights and really articulating that she feels like this state is going to be critical in that. And I was reminded by the fact that Republicans were just here, because I was on the highway getting here late last night, and there was a huge Trump 2024 billboard. And in some ways, it really reminded me that Republicans are also seeing this as a critical state. She started off her remarks thanking President Biden, talking about his legacy, saying that he was someone that she really respected and really praised his integrity and passing the torch to her. And then she pointedly went after former President Trump. She talked about the fact that he was a fraud, that he was a cheater, that he was someone who was a sexual abuser and a predator. And she said that as a prosecutor and having a career in prosecuting people, that she knew, she knows what it takes to win and to beat him. She also, though, talked about the fact that this isn't just a contrast between her and Trump, that she also wants to really focus on the future of America. And in that point, at one point, the crowd was cheering, don't go back, because she said, we will not go back. They also, I should say, were cheering, lock him up, referring to Donald Trump. One other thing that she was talking about was the middle class, putting a real fine point on the idea that she understands that there are people who are very frustrated in this economy, and that she wants people to be able to survive and thrive in America. So it really, I think, was a real, preview of what we're going to be hearing. But I think the thesis of her campaign is going to be that I'm a prosecutor, he's a convict. Who do you want to have in this election, Garrett?
Yamiche, this campaign is days old, but obviously Harris has run for president before. She inherits a lot of infrastructure. What does their messaging look like? How much do you get the sense that they are putting the plane together in midair at this moment?
It feels like they're putting the plane together in midair, but for weeks I've been reporting that allies of Vice President Harris were getting together and getting ready for this moment. They were talking about her path forward, wondering what state she should go through, wondering what sort of campaign staff she should have. Right now she's saying that she's going to keep the same campaign manager, the same campaign chair, but it really is in some ways still something that she's going to have to make up for lost ground here. So there is this sense that they are really scrambling to make sure that they get everything together. We've been reporting on the idea that now they've put some vetting materials out. I'm going to ask for vetting materials rather from potential vice presidential picks to be her running mate.
Yep.
So we have a list of people there that include a number of governors and a senator. So there are a number of sort of things that have to happen quickly here. But this is a campaign that also has the infrastructure of the Biden-Harris campaign. So there are already a lot of staffers. There's already a headquarters set up. And I will say they're hot off the presses. There were the new signs that said Kamala Harris, but there were also some handwritten signs in her campaign offices yesterday because I was there as she was talking to staff members, and you could see some people had to scribble in marker saying, hey, I'm still going to be a Kamala Harris fan, but we got to make sure we get this done quickly. So that in some ways underscores how fast this all came together. But my sense of it is that she's feeling confident because yesterday she told the staff, we're going to win this. We have a very clear and articulate message to give to Americans, and we think that we can do that and do that well. Garrett.
Yamiche, thank you. And Shaq, you know, any competent campaign can generate energy in the room, but how about where you are outside of that room? How are the voters you're talking to reacting to this sort of nascent Kamala Harris candidacy?
You know, Garrett, it really depends on the type of voter that you're talking to. If you were someone who was going to vote for President Biden already, or you're part of that Democratic base, then you're really excited right now. And that's what I've been hearing. Voters have been saying, yes, there is a deep appreciation for President Biden, but there's a deep excitement and enthusiasm around the vice president and the fact that they believe she's a better messenger and can take the fight to Donald Trump in a stronger way than Joe Biden. But of course, there are also those who are in the middle, those voters who we talked to who were unenthusiastic or undecided. For them, they're still taking a step back, it seems like. They're pausing a little bit, assessing the situation, still deciding what they want to hear and listening to see what more they can hear from the vice president. I want you to listen to the range of conversations that I've been having here in Kenosha.
I have much more confidence, for sure. Now having a younger, more energized candidate helps me feel better about Wisconsin.
I think we need better options, personally. I'm not a fan of Trump. I'm not a fan of Biden. I'm not a fan of Harris.
I think that if the DNC would have taken this path maybe 2 months ago, when these same problems existed, I might have leaned towards Kamala, our vice president.
You see, the vice president is clearly, she was here in Wisconsin, she's clearly making an effort. And for those in the middle, those still trying to figure it out, they know they have time, but you see the effort being made with the campaign schedule.
The scheduling is never fast enough with a dynamic situation like this. Yamiche, Shaq, thank you both for that reporting.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.